I'm sure at this point, some people are already tired of their social media feeds being filled with the Harrison Butker story. I'm going to try to move on from it after this. I want to use this story to illustrate a harsh reality for everybody, and that is the Catholic faith is the one faith that it's okay to denigrate in the culture. I'm not saying that that's how it should be, but as a Catholic, I'm sure you've noticed this. In this discourse, Harrison Butker has stood in as sort of a straw man to be the to put the faith on trial. That's essentially what it is. And specifically, the identifiable Catholic faith as it existed before about 60 years ago, before your two options in the church were to either be lukewarm in the face of radical changes and just go along with things, or to embrace radical changes and become a full-throated supporter. Those were your options until very recently, with the resurgence of traditional Catholicism, thanks to the overreaches of Francis the Great and Merciful. But Harrison Butker is standing in this, and is beginning to show us some really strange things going on in the culture. But overtly, it's not just the culture that's against us. It's Catholics. A lot of Catholics are upset at the things he said. That in the face of one very positive sign in all this. I don't usually like using materialist examples for this, but it is right now. That man's football jersey is the number one selling jersey in the NFL right now in all their web stores. And that started after his speech. So at least when it comes to the sanity of what he said, the people are generally with us. But if you want to have a look into what I call bizarro world, we go to here. This is actually from a local Oklahoma news station, maybe the biggest news station here in Oklahoma. And its headline is Whoopi Goldberg on Harrison Butker remarks. These are his beliefs and he's welcome to them. Whoopi Goldberg is about to be a voice of reason in all of this because she was responding to something a so-called moderate commentator by the name of Sarah Haynes said. And here's a summation of it from the article. Quote, The View co-host Sarah Haynes said she does not want people's views to be shut down for the sake of free speech, but disagreed with Goldberg's comparison to the Kaepernick situation. That football player was standing up for the rights of many and saying in a social justice moment, this is a reminder that we're not there yet, Haynes said. What this man, Harrison Butker, is doing is not just a devout Catholic. This is someone who's practicing something called the traditional Latin Mass, which is a divergent from the majority of Catholics. It's being compared to being, quote, an extremist, like some religions in the Middle East and Asia. So this is a very extreme religion. Haynes argued Butker is not walking with Jesus by using his religion's views to oppress people, end quote. That's what they think of us. The Catholic faith, as was practiced until 60 years ago, is apparently fringe stuff. That's what they're saying. This is a moderate saying that. Now, how is it that Whoopi Goldberg is the voice of what we'll call American-style reason, which is really just institutionalized lukewarmness, but what she says here is more reasonable than what that anti-Catholic says, because that anti-Catholic can't even, right? So here's Whoopi Goldberg, the voice of reason in all this. Again, we're truly in bizarro world. Quote, Goldberg interjected, but if this is his belief system, if there are many Catholics who are staunch this way, to which Haynes interjected, noting a small percentage fall under the traditional Latin Mass. The View co-host Whoopi Goldberg defended Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker, who was under fire for suggesting women should prioritize being a homemaker over their career ambitions. These are his beliefs and he's welcome to them, Goldberg said during an episode of The View Thursday, adding, I don't have to believe them, right? I don't have to accept them, end quote. That's not exactly what he said, but it's more reasonable than a lot of the other things. And I'm leading with this because these are secularists on the general progressive side of the aisle saying this stuff. It's more reasonable than what you're about to see from within the Catholic Church. And so we're just going to go next to a Catholic apologist whom most of you, I'm sure, have heard of, at least in the United States. Chris Stefanik said this. Catholic apologist Chris Stefanik couldn't bring himself to at least be vaguely positive towards the family structure as it has existed all throughout history until basically last week. And he did it by saying this on Twitter. My take on the speech at Benedictine If his, Butker's, wisdom and discernment had matched his courage, it would have been the world's best graduation speech. I'll chew it over and give my commentary next week. And here's your reminder, it's okay to chew on things before commenting in detail. Okay. That is what we call the more, frankly, fraidy cat kind of response to this. But that's what you get from a Catholic apologist who has appeared on Catholic Answers, who couldn't quite bring himself to defend a position that wouldn't have been considered radical until like a few decades ago. In the grand history of the human species, last week. That's when it became that way. But another take from within the church, that this one is just completely weird. Maybe you saw people quoting this online, but I'm going to give you this in full. These are the nuns from Mount Scholastica. All right, I want to show you the picture of these nuns here before we read this. But there's their picture here. I wish I could get rid of this drop down that's blocking things, but there's the nuns. You wouldn't know that they're nuns. They look like they're secretaries working in the secular world, right? But these are the nuns, and this is their short statement in response to his, how very dare he say normal things. Again, most people think what he's saying is reasonably normal given the jersey sales that are happening. So, statement in response to the 2024 Benedictine College Commencement Address. The Sisters of Mount St. Scholastica do not believe that Harrison Butker's comments in his 2024 Benedictine College Commencement Address represent the Catholic Benedictine Liberal Arts College that our founders envisioned and which we have been so invested. Instead of promoting unity in our church, our nation, and the world, his comments seem to have fostered division. One of our concerns was the assertion that being a homemaker is the highest calling for a woman. Pause here. That's not what he said. We'll keep going. We sisters have dedicated our lives to God and God's people, including the many women whom we have taught and influenced during the past 160 years. These women have made a tremendous difference in the world in their roles as wives and mothers and through their God-given gifts in leadership, scholarship, and their careers. Our community has taught young women and men not just how to be homemakers in a limited sense, but rather how to make a gospel-centered, compassionate home within themselves, where they can welcome others as Christ, empowering them to be the best versions of themselves. We reject a narrow definition of what it means to be Catholic. We are faithful members of the Catholic Church who embrace and promote the values of the gospel, St. Benedict and Vatican II, and the teachings of Pope Francis. We want to be known as an inclusive, welcoming community, embracing Benedictine values that have endured for more than 1,500 years and have spread through every continent and nation. We believe those values are the core of the Benedictine College. We thank all who are supportive of our Mount community and the values we hold. With St. Benedict, we pray, let us prefer nothing whatever to Christ, and may he lead us all together to life everlasting. I wonder what St. Benedict would have to say about all this. I'm very curious. If you have any idea what St. Benedict would have to say about this, let me know in the live chat or in the comments, please. Now, that article is being tweeted out and posted on Facebook and other places with an accompanying image of the nuns, and I don't have it here. I wish I did, but the average age of that community of nuns is about 70. There are like 4 young women there, again, dressed like secretaries. You wouldn't know they're religious. You'd think you walked into like a luncheon, basically, with for women who are in the professional working sphere, and they were having like some sort of like career advice given from the older generation to a handful of younger women looking for career advice. That's what you would think when you look at that picture, and it's very clear from that picture that religious community will cease to exist in 10 to 20 years. And just to put it bluntly. Why is that? Well, because they uphold the values of Vatican II and Pope Francis. That's why. Those religious communities are disappearing. They just are. There's no nice way to put it. And they're not the only ones to do this, unfortunately. We go now to, frankly, America Magazine, which will surprise nobody whatsoever. So you get this. Headline is Harrison Butker's commencement speech and the danger of a Catholic dead traditionalism. Again, this is the Jesuits saying this, and the Jesuits are the most powerful religious group in the institutional church today. They are, without question. They have for decades been the go-between between the bishops and the Holy Father, regardless of who's been sitting on the throne of Peter. As we know, because Pope Benedict XVI told I thought it was John Venari. I was corrected by somebody in there that it wasn't. So it may have been Father Nicholas Gruner who said it, but that somebody in that when they met with Benedict face to face and asked him why he wasn't doing stuff about the McCarrick types in the church, that people have written many letters to Rome, that he said that none of the letters ever got to him, that people read his mail. And it's the Jesuits have been in that position for a very, very long time, for most of the post-conciliar period. So here is from the Jesuits. Harrison Butker's commencement speech on the dangers of a Catholic dead traditionalism. Yes, our faith, the Catholic faith, as it would have been identified by our ancestors back to time immemorial, is a dead traditionalism. Not the faith of those who came before that we keep alive. That's apparently not what we're doing. It's apparently a dead faith. That's what the Jesuits are saying. The article smears Harrison Butker, hinting that he hates our so-called elder brothers in the faith because he's a traditional Catholic, that he has animosity towards the ladies because he defended normal family relations, and that he is just full of a hate more broadly. The article quotes him briefly, then corrects him by showing that the post-conciliar church has to say on his various so-called errors. So, I'll give you an example here, just one. Quote, finally, Mr. Butker is not shy about his liturgical preferences. He unabashedly discusses his love for the traditional Latin Mass, a love that I once shared, says the author, Zach Davis, and encourages students to seek it out to bring order to their lives. He says, quoting him directly, I do not attend the TLM because I think that I am better than others, or for the smells and bells, or even for the love of Latin. I attend the traditional Mass because I believe that as the God of the Old Testament was pretty particular about how he wanted to be worshipped. The same holds true for us today. Pope Francis, with his motu proprio Traditionis Custodes, restricted the celebration of the TLM. This is the author now saying. Mr. Butker has a solution for the graduates. Don't simply consider cost of living when deciding where to live after graduation. Seek out a place where the TLM is readily available. This advice suggests that God has perhaps not spoken through an ecumenical council or subsequent popes who have moved the church away from the traditional Latin Mass. It's one thing to prefer the Latin Mass. It's another to argue that the Novus Ordo just won't cut it anymore. End quote. See what they're doing here? They're using him. They're making a straw man out of what he said and using him to knock down all of their boogeymen in the church and in the broader culture. And you're seeing this across the media right now, but especially in Catholic circles. He has become the sort of punching bag for the traditional Catholics, meaning not traditional Catholics going after him, but the institutional voices who defend the revolution in the church are knocking down a straw man that they've created, and they're calling it Harrison Butker. It's really rather remarkable. But they spend a lot of time setting up that straw man and knocking it down, and then they give us this. Let me see if I can find the place here. I thought I highlighted it, but okay. They reduce everything he said to an ideology. Everything. Traditional Catholicism is an ideology to them. When it's a dead faith, it becomes an ideology. An ideology meaning it's just pure politics. Most of us would love if we could just not care about what was going on in the church. The things in the church were fine enough that we traditional Catholics could practice our faith and it would be fine. But for whatever reason, there are enough institutional roadblocks that we have to be more active than that. And because of that, they tend to think we're ideologues, which is really weird. But here is what he has to say on this. Quote, but the ideology espoused by Mr. Butker goes beyond that. It reminds me of what Pope Francis has warned about repeatedly throughout his pontificate. Here he is in 2022, quoting Francis. There is the fashion in every age, but in this age in the church's life, I consider it dangerous. That instead of drawing from the roots in order to move forward, meaning fine traditions, we step back, not going up or down, but backwards. This backstepping makes us a sect. It makes you closed and cuts off your horizons. Those people who call themselves guardians of traditions, but of dead traditions. The true Catholic, Christian, and human tradition is what that 5th century theologian, St. Vincent of Lerins, described as a constant growth. Throughout history, tradition grows, progresses, and then he says some stuff in Latin. That is authentic tradition, which progresses with our children. Let me pause here before we continue with this. I hope I demonstrated amply to you that over the course of a year, by providing the actual St. Vincent of Lerins work he's quoting here, that I proved to you that Francis is misappropriating St. Vincent of Lerins. St. Vincent of Lerins told us, a doctor of the church, told us to resist novelties in the church regardless of whoever's promoting them, that we are to cling rigidly to what came before. Yes, faith develops, but he's conflating a natural development here, Francis is, with the novelties in the church. And St. Vincent of Lerins' work, it does a fine job, a masterful job of showing the difference between organic development of the faith and novelty. If you haven't checked that out, I think I've got it as a playlist. If not, I really should get on that. You should check it out or just read his book called The Commentary. You could probably read it in 2 to 3 days. It's very accessible. One of the reasons why I spent a year bringing small portions of it to the audience. Let's go back to the article. Without a doubt, there are things in our culture that the church should stand against, but we should be aware that we do not close ourselves off to the world in doing that. For my money, if the church has any chance of growth in our culture, it will need to come from attraction. From beautiful liturgies, yes, but also from our humble service to the vulnerable and prophetic calls for a more just society. And for all the media coverage and viral TikToks about his speech, there was not much in there that was attractive. Mr. Butker quoted the lyrics of his teammate's girlfriend, Taylor Swift, "Familiarity breeds contempt," but he demonstrated what contempt for the outside world breeds. One of the few pieces of advice that was not controversial was one he seemed to ignore. Being locked in with your vocation and staying in your lane is going to be the surest way for you to find true happiness and peace in life. How's that for a kicker? Right, but again, what they do here, as we have seen over and over again, they conflate vocation with job. Harrison Butker's vocation is not playing football. His vocation is being a husband and father. He's using, as we all should, his influence to preach the faith. That's it. And that's what they're upset about. They really, really, really are upset about this. Again, these are Catholics doing this too. But moving on, we have, of course, something here from the National Catholic Reporter, because they couldn't help themselves either, along the similar kind of lines. Their headline is, "Stay in your lane," says Kansas City football player far outside his lane. Again, you are not allowed to criticize the what's going on in the church at all. If he had come out and talked about how great Pope Francis was, how he loved the traditional mass, but how great the ordinary form was, and how we should all get out there, get our hands dirty, and make a mess of things, and unity, 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 synodality, synodality, synodality. If that has been his commencement speech, they'd be singing his praises. And none of us would be making videos about him right now. But instead, he said Catholic stuff. And that's why they're upset. Their point in this article is that he is a hypocrite. He went after the U.S. bishops and told people to avoid becoming lay theologians, basically, and they call him a hypocrite and an ideologue for this. But look how they frame this. Quote, hold on, I lost my splay here. Okay. While the total incongruence of devaluing women's professional pursuits, okay, at their own college graduation is aptly attended to in the video's virality, this is not a new belief. More and more Tradwife values are being spread by Catholic influencers. What most astonishes me, the author, about this speech is the utter hypocrisy of insisting upon a traditional Catholicism while undermining the authority of clerical leadership. Let's pause here. For those who didn't see my video yesterday, you should watch that on this. He went after the U.S. bishops. I chose that angle specifically because the entire media coverage is about what he said about family relations. But he went after the U.S. bishops. And I think that was remarkable that he took that stand, because that's actually, I think, more of a risk for him in a real way than going after the material stuff that he went after. It's not a criticism of him at all, but he went after the U.S. bishops. He went after everything wrong in the church, including their leadership. And we'll get to church response to that, by the way, here in a second. But quoting him some more. He goes so far as to say the average American bishop leads an inconsequential existence. Setting this disregard for intrinsic human dignity aside, would not a traditional Catholic perspective be to submit to your bishop's catechetical authority? Butker himself says it is not prudent for the laity to consume ourselves with becoming amateur theologians, unless, unlike Butker, who studied industrial engineering, you have studied theology at a Catholic institution. Does he not then disqualify himself from his very endeavor? Are we to believe there was not a single qualified bishop or theologian available to give this speech instead? End quote. Again, they're trying to discredit him, even though he gave probably the most on-point lay speech I've heard in a long time, and he has no formal theological background. Now, I will talk more about the Tradwife phenomenon in the coming days, because trust me on this one, That is something I've been paying a close attention to, and this has got the institution church freaked out. At least like the Jesuit side of things, are very freaked out by the sudden rise of the Tradwife thing. For those who don't know what that is, there's a group of young women who realize they've been lied to by the secular world about the, we'll call it the ideology of women. They bought into it fully, lived the life they were supposed to live, had to live the life of wreckage, basically, came to their senses and realized they've been lied to and are trying to figure out the truth of things. Some of them deciding they just want to go back to the way things used to be. This growing movement, led by social media influencers, some of whom are not honest brokers about this, some of them are just trying to make a quick buck, but this is growing. It's growing in a real way. It's one of the signs that the culture is shifting in a way that they don't like, that there is a pendulum shift happening. And this has everybody on the Jesuit side of things really freaked out. You know, those nuns I mentioned a moment ago, the ones who don't look like nuns, who look like they're having coffee at a secretariat luncheon at some like conference somewhere, they are freaked out by this too. But that's what they're doing. This article just sort of sets up a straw man about all this. Setting up a straw man because at the end of the day, what freaks out the modernists is the idea that women find their solace being mothers. Butker didn't say that's all they should do, but that many find peace doing that. And that's objectively true. And the data backs him up. Again, the Tradwife movement's growing. And more moderately, many women are realizing that the ideology of women that they were sold was just a pack of lies. Many very resentful because they lost some of their best years pursuing material gain and power and have emotional scarring from it. This rejection of that ideology is growing without a doubt, and they can't stand it. Again, we'll talk about more of that in the coming days. But we're going to talk about what this really means here now. You see, this came from a secular outlet. I've got so many tabs open here, it takes me a second to actually bring everything here. But you have this story that I think encapsulates much of what this is about. And this is from The Spectator. The headline is, "In today's America, Catholicism is the most persecuted religion. The backlash Harrison Butker has received is just the most recent example." A lot of people don't want to believe it, but it's actually true. And some of us have noticed that in the social media discourse about all this has been something that is remarkable, and that is some people will be like, no, evangelicals are the worst, yada, 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 yada. And then other people say, no, there's a growing progressive movement. They've been behind all the whatever weird, distorted movements in the culture have been the last few years. Growing numbers of evangelicals have bought into it. The thing is, Catholics have also bought into it. But the thing about that is, in the Catholic Church, the reverse is true. The church is becoming more conservative. I'm going to work on a video for later in the week, in the coming days, about that. The church is becoming more conservative in America. Traditional Catholicism is growing. The demand for reverent ordinary form masses is growing. The demand for the Catholic faith and the hard truths about what the church has to say on social matters is growing, and people don't want to buy it. Take a quick moment here. Lottie said, used her member free super chat. This reminds me, if you're a channel member, if you threw that join button on Patreon, the join button on YouTube, you get a free super chat once a month. She says, Harrison just said the truth, and that's absolutely right. But here's this story. It really is the truth that if the Catholicism is the religion that's the most allowed to be gone after. We saw that with the story with with Dear Leader and his security forces investigating the church in America. Where did they go? They went to traditional Catholics. The Catholic faith is the one you're allowed to denigrate. As this person on Twitter said, please tell me one other religion in the U.S. that's currently faces more blatant and open persecution than Catholicism. It's not these others. It's not cafeteria Christianity. You can't name one. And he's saying this in response to now there being nearly 200,000 signatures at the change.org petition demanding that the NFL kick him out. The NFL's not going to do that. He is a key player on a 3-time Super Bowl winning team. His jersey is selling out faster than anything else. They're not going to do that. They're not. But the article goes on. It says, this is obviously and unambiguously correct. And there's a body of evidence well above and beyond the explicitly anti-Catholic fervor that met Butker in response to his speech. As Brad pointed out elsewhere, Catholics are without a doubt the single most frequent and substantial religious target of the American security state and the federal government more broadly. Dear leaders' security forces have tracked, targeted, and even infiltrated the churches of traditional Catholics, while the agency deemed as potential bad guys that traditional Catholics. The department in question, as Brad noted, has particularly targeted anti-Moloch Catholics for going after with a blatantly evil and unconstitutional federal act, but refuses to prosecute those who violate that same act against Catholics. Catholic charities have been targeted by the state through progressive mandates and dragged into the court system to defend their conscious rights. Even Catholic hospitals have been subjected to increasingly brazen persecution at the hands of the bureaucratic state. But all this stems from a much more pervasive, targeted anti-Catholic disposition among America's ruling class. It's often expressed casually, in passing, and then it goes into some rather famous ones. Feinstein's infamous dogma lives loudly within Amy Coney Barrett, with a rampant and specifically anti-Catholic resentment visible in the leaked emails of that woman and her inner circle. That was back in 2012. Okay. But it manifests in material attacks too. When the potentially worst decision in our country's court history was overturned, left-wing vandalists immediately set about attacking Catholic churches. It was Catholics, specifically Catholics that they viewed as the wellspring of right-wing evil. All that was on display this week amid Butker debacle. Within a matter of hours, the outrage on the left shifted to what Butker said as his distinctive set of statements to the broader insidious influence of the Catholic Church. And then it goes on to what we started with, the show on the View. It's simply true that in our time, the Catholic Church is okay to go after. It is simply true. And which brings me to, I think, I'll just give you another example of a Catholic thing here. I'm not going to go over it too detail, but this one comes from this comes from an officially sanctioned outlet from the Diocese of Chicago, meaning Cardinal Supich's diocese. No, Harrison Butker, men alone do not set the tone. The Catholic Church is stronger, more vibrant, thanks to women's diverse contributions in the home, in religious life, and in the workplace. You get the idea. That's officially sanctioned. But this is why I think it's time for me to give you some good news, I think, on this first. We start here with an account called Mr. Casey, who is simply just sharing what Butker's bishop said. He said, quote, Butker's bishop, Bishop James Johnson of Kansas City. Harrison Butker's passion for his Catholic faith and his family are beautiful and well known. He has strong opinions on where we are as a church and as a nation. I support Mr. Butker's rights to share his faith and express his opinions, including those that are critical of bishops. Good on Bishop Johnson of this. I have no idea about anything else he stands for, but good on him for this. And I hope this extends to everybody else. And that's a link to a Catholic News Agency article that we won't go over here. But he gets support he's getting support from his own bishop, which is the first priority of who he should be supporting him. And then next he gets one from Bishop Strickland, who said on Twitter, quote, as voices are raised against Harrison Butker's speech at Benedictine College, let us stand strong and resist their attempts to silence the truth. Harrison spoke in love to the graduates and to our culture. Even leaders in the church speak against tradition, but let us remember the truth prevails because Jesus Christ is truth incarnate. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And of course, I think my favorite one, though, is short because this is a bishop who doesn't speak up often enough for my money. Here he is responding to a Forbes article. It's Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, who said, his call for young Catholic men to put their vocations as husbands and fathers first could not be more important. Surely we spiritual fathers can ponder his call to us too. Faithfulness is the way. And he invites people to read the speech for themselves. That's a good response from Corleone, who acknowledged in a soft way the criticism that the football players laid at the feet of the bishops, deservedly so. That's why I focused on that yesterday. But to see the secular concern parroted by Catholic media, I mean, there's a whole lot more of this out there from Catholic outlets. Substack posts from people who have a huge readership are trying to shred him by making the secular values on this that are at question, conflating them with what the church teaches, which is at the core of what we have been dealing with in the church since the 1960s, a conflation of secular norms on the church. It's why the church has been in a state of constant change and constant revolution since then. It began when John the 23rd said at the open of the council that we were going to enter a phase of what's called aggiornamento, which is simply a phase of permanent reform, never-ending reform, which is a nice way of saying never-ending revolution. That's what it's about. That's where we are. And he wanted the church, the windows of the church open to the world to let some fresh air in. That fresh air being the ideas of the secular world, that the church could learn from the secular world. See it reflected in the documents of Vatican II, this alleged new understanding of human dignity that you see in a couple of the documents. Nonsense on its face. But that's how we get to where we are. The church being at the service of the secular world. And it's time to stop. Regardless of whatever else it might be, it's time to stop. To stop with that. I'm glad he stood up for it, and I'm really happy to see 3 bishops acknowledge what he said about the church. Hopefully we'll get more of those. I'd love to share more of those with you in another live stream, like at the back end of things, because I don't want to spend all my time talking about a celebrity who's saying truthful things. It's nice to see it when it happens, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to spend all my time on it. Thank you, Miriam, and thank you for praying for my intentions. Wow. I did not know that Substack is banned in some countries. So that's interesting. It's just a blogging post. It's like the new version of blogging. It's all Substack is. So I don't understand the controversy behind it, but Catholic Cat says, it is sad that not only are we hated by the world, but we are at odds with our beautiful church. The nuns told it like it is by who they are faithful to now. Yes. Their outrage, and the nuns that I presented towards the beginning, their outrage about things was based on their faith. But is it the Catholic faith? Or is it whatever it is that passes for Catholicism that has developed over the last 60 years? There is a conflict in the church. And that's why we can't simply all be Catholic, but we have labels, because there's a conflict in the church. And it has because it's coming from the very top by changing church teaching or doing mental gymnastics to try to claim that this completely changed teaching of the church is actually the same and developed organically from before the council. It's a conflict. And some of us want the actual identifiable Catholicism. JT doesn't like Substack. I don't know who JT is. Who's JT? I'm not sure. TikTok is gone in France. Wow. Teresa, that's where I started. I started with the Scholastica nuns. That's where I started. I'd suggest watching this from the beginning. That's not where I didn't exactly start there. I started with Whoopi Goldberg, but went to the nuns pretty quickly after. Too many bishops try to be the cool guys. It's almost like these guys were not popular as teenagers and are trying to be the popular guy now, says Alexis. That is absolutely correct. Peregrine Catholic says Harrison Butker did exactly what Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen told the laity to do. Yes. That's exactly what he's doing exactly what Sheen told them to do. They just don't like it when when we do that. They'd rather we quote all the nice things that Sheen said instead of the harder things. The ape of the church stuff, and the laity go out and actually defend the faith. Sonny Jim says, look at the state of society today. There are your secular ideas on display. Precisely. Bishop Strickland is a lone voice in the depths of sin. Glad to see the others speak out too, but Strickland is consistently speaking truth. Yeah, him and Vigano and a couple others. But yeah, and Vigano is still active. I posted something on Twitter yesterday. Somebody made me aware that there's a priest with a YouTube channel who's been posting things on Facebook attacking me personally, and I just found it funny. But I just posted it on Twitter. But the guy claimed that Vigano went silent. If you haven't seen it, Vigano in the last few days, and I'll put it in the live chat here. Actually, it's a link to another place on YouTube. But I'll put it here in the live chat. Vigano had an interview with Raymond Arroyo on EWTN. So yeah, that's not going silent by any stretch of the imagination. But there's a link in the live chat. I'll try to remember to put it in my show notes at Return to Tradition here within the next hour or so after this is over. Is there any final thoughts in the live chat? Oh, JT is Big Man Justin up in Canada. Gotcha. That's who JT is. Took me a second to realize what you're talking about. He'll be gone soon, though. If there's any final thoughts in the live chat, let me know what they are now, and so we can wrap it up. Brandon says, you must carry your cross. The Vatican can't carry your cross. Don't buy the lies. Yes. reject the sort of this false gospel of softness and joy in things. Yes, joy is part of our faith, but it should not also replace sorrow for our sins and sorrow for the state of the world. Yes, joy in the opportunity of salvation, the graces God gives us, but we have to carry our cross. All right, folks. David Wilson says it's often the laity that keep Eastern Orthodox bishops in line. But yeah, but even there, that they're starting to waffle there, because you're seeing some various groups within Eastern Orthodoxy embracing some of the really bad ideas of the world. All you have to do is see that one of the ecumenical patriarchs helped Francis write Laudato Si, as an example. Catholic gatekeepers are freaking out, but it is over. I think they're in a state of grief. Yes, I think they are too. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in today. And as always, pray for the church and everybody we spoke about today, especially those who gave you any kind of negative thoughts about them. We got to think about things in charity. Pray for them. Say a prayer for them. It's the greatest act of charity you can give somebody. It really is to pray for their salvation. All right, folks. Thanks very much for tuning in. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.